The Galactic Confederation starship Celestial Harmony was anything but harmonious at the moment. Alarms blared through every deck, emergency lights flashed their angry red warnings, and the ship's AI had taken to repeatedly announcing the obvious in that irritatingly calm voice all AIs seem programmed with. Warning. Critical system failure detected. Estimated time to catastrophic hull breach, 4 standard hours. Captain Trelviek, a tall, willowy Altharian with skin the color of pale moonlight, slammed a 6-fingered hand onto the command console. We understand, Cora. Mute alarm notifications. The ship's AI fell silent, though the visual warnings continued their silent disco throughout the bridge. Engineering report, Trelvick demanded, antennae twitching with barely suppressed anxiety. Chief Engineer Glocksmar, a stocky Peluvian with emerald scales and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, looked up from his diagnostic panel. If a reptilian could look like they were about to have a nervous breakdown, Glocksmar was the poster child. It's the quantum flux regulator, Captain. The primary, secondary, and tertiary backups have all cascaded into failure. Without it, the antimatter containment field will destabilize, and he made a gesture with his clawed hands that universally translates to "we all go boom." Navigator Pym, a gelatinous blob of translucent blue whose species communicated through color shifts and ripples across their surface, turned an alarming shade of mustard yellow, the Quivarian equivalent of extreme distress. "Can we repair it?" asked First Officer Zendri, a feline Miraxian whose whiskers were practically vibrating with tension. Glocksmar gave the Confederacy's equivalent of a bitter laugh, a series of clicking sounds from the back of his throat. "With what?" "The quantum flux regulator requires specialized tools we don't have and materials we can't fabricate. It's cutting-edge Confederacy tech. We're in uncharted space, at least 16 cycles from the nearest outpost." The science officer, Dr. Lumi, a bioluminescent humanoid whose skin glowed with an internal light that brightened with his emotions, currently a stressful bright yellow, looked up from his console. "Captain, I'm detecting another vessel within communication range." "It's oh no." "What is it?" Trelviek demanded. "It's a human ship." The bridge fell silent. Humans. From Earth. Classification Deathworld 7. The stories about humans were legendary and terrifying. Creatures evolved on a planet that seemed designed to kill them, with extreme temperature variations, deadly predators, natural disasters, and gravity that would crush most sentient species into paste. Humans didn't just survive there, they thrived, conquered, and then got bored and started exploring space. "Open a channel," the captain ordered, antennae now rigid with determination. "At this point, we have nothing to lose." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a human female with dark skin and hair pulled back into what humans called a ponytail. She wore a simple uniform with the emblem of the Earth Space Corps. "This is Captain Maya Rodriguez of the ESC Persistent Curiosity. We received your automated distress signal. How can we assist?" Trelviek squared their shoulders. "Captain Rodriguez, we have experienced a catastrophic failure of our quantum flux regulator. Without repairs, we have approximately 4 hours before total antimatter containment failure." The human's expression remained frustratingly difficult to read, another unsettling trait of the species. "A quantum flux regulator? That's Confederacy tech. We don't carry compatible parts." Trelviek's hopes plummeted faster than a stone in Jupiter's gravity well. But Rodriguez continued with a peculiar expression that the aliens would later learn was called a smirk. "I've got something better. I've got a human engineer." The airlock cycled with a pneumatic hiss, and the security team of the Celestial Harmony stood at alert. Weapons not quite pointed at the floor, but definitely not holstered either. First Officer Zendri's fur stood slightly on end, betraying his nervousness despite his professional demeanor. When the inner door finally slid open, the alien crew couldn't help but stare at the creature that sauntered in. Jack Reynolds was average height for a human, which made him tower over most of the Celestial Harmony's crew, with broad shoulders, a scruffy beard, and piercing blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a simple jumpsuit with numerous pockets and carried nothing but a battered duffel bag that had seen better days. So he said, grinning in that alarming way humans do, showing far too many teeth. I hear you folks have a quantum thingy on the fritz? Chief Engineer Glocksmar's scales briefly shifted to a lighter shade, the Peluvian equivalent of blanching. You're the engineer? He asked, eyeing the primitive cloth bag skeptically. Jack Reynolds, at your service, the human replied, offering a hand in that bizarre human greeting ritual that involved grasping appendages. When no one reciprocated, he smoothly transitioned to a Confederacy salute instead. 20 years experience with everything from colony ships to deep space explorers. If it's broken, I can fix it. Captain Trelveek stepped forward. Mr. Reynolds, we appreciate your assistance, but our situation is quite dire. Our quantum flux regulator has failed. It's highly advanced technology. Yeah, your captain gave me the basics, Jack interrupted with a casual disregard for protocol that made Zendri's whiskers twitch in irritation. Mind if I take a look? Clock's ticking, right? Without waiting for a response, Jack started walking toward the engineering section, as if he owned the ship. Glocksmar hurried after him, shooting a panicked look back at the captain. The human seems confident, Dr. Lumi observed, his skin pulsing between concerned orange and curious purple. Humans are always confident, Zendri muttered. Even when they're wrong. Especially when they're wrong. The engineering bay of the Celestial Harmony was a marvel of Confederation technology, sleek, efficient, with holographic interfaces and automated systems that practically ran themselves. Or they would, if everything wasn't currently flashing red and displaying critical failure warnings. Jack whistled as he entered. Nice setup you got here. Very clean. Glocksmar puffed up his chest scales slightly, a sign of pride. The Celestial Harmony is one of the most advanced research vessels in the Confederation fleet. Aha, Jack said, already ignoring the alien as he circled the central reactor housing. And where's this quantum flux doohickey? Glocksmar's assistant, a young Altharian named Vex, who had been watching the human with undisguised fascination, pointed to a sealed compartment near the reactor core. It's in there, but you'll need environmental protection too. Before he could finish, Jack had already popped the maintenance hatch and stuck his head inside the compartment. Are you insane? Glocksmar screeched, scales flaring in alarm. That area has residual radiation and quantum particles. You need protective gear. Jack pulled his head out, looking completely unharmed. Oh, this level of radiation? Barely a sunburn for us humans. Our cells regenerate pretty quick. He reached into his duffel bag and pulled out what appeared to be a primitive scanning device that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. Let's see what we're dealing with here. The engineering crew watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as Jack examined the failed regulator with his odd assortment of tools. Some electronic, some laughably primitive, including an actual reflecting mirror, and something he called a tuning fork. Should we inform the captain that the human is exposing himself to potentially lethal conditions? Vex whispered to Glocksmar. I can hear you, Jack called out without looking up from his work. And trust me, this isn't even in the top 10 most dangerous things I'll do today. He emerged from the compartment, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit. Well, I've got good news and bad news. Captain Trelveek had joined them by this point, along with Dr. Lumi. What's the good news? The captain asked cautiously. Jack grinned that unsettling human grin again. I can fix it. The aliens exchanged hopeful glances. And the bad news? Dr. Lumi prompted. You're probably not going to like how I do it. Absolutely not. Glocksmar's scales had turned a deep crimson, a sure sign of Peluvian outrage. What you're suggesting violates at least 17 Confederation engineering protocols. Jack Reynolds leaned against the reactor housing, arms crossed, looking supremely unconcerned by the alien engineer's protest. Look, Scales, we've got. He checked a primitive timepiece strapped to his wrist. 3 hours and 22 minutes before this nice ship becomes a very pretty but very deadly space firework. Your protocols won't save you. My way will. Captain Trelveek raised a hand to silence further argument from Glocksmar. Explain your solution again, Mr. Reynolds, in terms we can understand. Jack sighed and reached into his duffel bag, pulling out a roll of silvery material. This is duct tape. Humans have been using it to fix everything from spacecraft to water pipes for over a century. Tape. Dr. Loomy repeated the word as if it were a complex scientific concept he was trying to grasp. His skin had turned a confused shade of teal. You want to repair our quantum flux regulator with adhesive strips. Not just the tape, Jack corrected, digging deeper into his seemingly bottomless bag. He produced a small tube, several metal objects that looked like primitive tools, and a packet of some kind of rubbery substance. We'll also need this epoxy compound, these clamps, and a bit of this stuff. Vex leaned closer to examine the packet. What is that? Chewing gum, Jack said matter-of-factly. There was a moment of stunned silence, broken only by the continuing alarms. Chewing gum? Glocksmar repeated faintly. You masticate this substance for pleasure, and now wish to use it as a component in critical starship repairs? Pretty much, Jack confirmed. When combined with the epoxy and properly secured, it creates a flexible seal that can withstand the quantum fluctuations until you reach a proper repair facility. Zendri, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. This is absurd. Captain, we cannot allow this human to desecrate our ship with these primitive methods. Jack threw up his hands. Fine. Got any better ideas? Anyone? Because I'm not seeing a lot of options here. The aliens exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had already exhausted their conventional repair options before the human arrived. The thing about us humans, Jack continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone, is that we're really good at improvising. On Earth, we call it jury-rigging or MacGyvering or just plain making do. It's not always pretty, but it works. Captain Trelvik's antennae twitched thoughtfully. Mr. Reynolds, if we were to allow this unconventional approach, what are the chances of success? Jack shrugged. I'd say about 70-30 in our favor. Those are not particularly reassuring odds, Trelvik observed. Better than 0-100, which is what you've got now, Jack countered. Glocksmar turned to Captain Trelvik, his voice lowered but still audible to everyone. Captain, this is madness. This human wants to repair one of the most sophisticated pieces of technology in the galaxy with items that wouldn't look out of place in a primitive campsite. Jack snorted. You know I can still hear you, right? Before Glocksmar could respond, another alarm started blaring. Containment field destabilizing faster than projected, Cora announced serenely. Estimated time to catastrophic failure, 2 hours, 45 minutes. The captain's antennae went rigid. The situation has deteriorated. Mr. Reynolds, you have my authorization to proceed with your method. But Captain Glocksmar began. That's an order, Chief Engineer, Trelvik said firmly. Work with Mr. Reynolds. Learn from him if you can. Glocksmar's scales settled into a resigned olive color. Yes, Captain. Jack clapped his hands together. Great. Now I'm going to need a couple of things that aren't in my bag. Got any alcohol on board? The stronger the better. Dr. Loomy blinked rapidly, his glow pulsing in confusion. You require intoxicants to work? Jack laughed. It's not for drinking, though. That wouldn't hurt either. It's for cleaning the surfaces before we apply the adhesives. I'll check the medical supplies, Dr. Loomy offered. And Jack added, I'm going to need to go outside the ship. This statement caused yet another uproar among the alien crew. Outside? In space? Vex squeaked. Yep, Jack confirmed, already rummaging in his bag again. Part of the regulator is external. Can't fix it from in here. Zendri's tail lashed once in agitation. Our EVA suits won't fit you. Jack pulled out what looked like a folded piece of fabric from his bag. Brought my own. Never leave home without it. The aliens watched in disbelief as Jack shook out what appeared to be a comically inadequate spacesuit, thin, flexible, and far too fragile, looking for the vacuum of space. That cannot possibly provide adequate protection, Glocksmar stated flatly. Jack winked at him. Humans are full of surprises, Scales. Now, who's going to show me to the airlock? External atmospheric pressure dropping to compensate for hull integrity, Cora's placid voice announced. Please utilize breathing apparatus. The alien crew quickly donned their respiratory masks as the ship's atmospheric pressure reduced. Jack, however, simply took a deep breath and continued working, seemingly unbothered. How are you not struggling to breathe? Vex asked, voice muffled through his mask. Earth's a high-pressure world, Jack explained as he carefully applied epoxy to a component. I can handle lower pressure for a while. It's actually refreshing, like being in the mountains back home. Glocksmar shook his head in disbelief. Just another reminder that you evolved on a death world. We prefer to call it challenging, Jack grinned. Now hold this clamp steady while I wrap the conductor with this tape. The engineering bay had been transformed into what the aliens could only describe as organized chaos. Jack had dismantled parts of the quantum flux regulator that the manual specifically stated should never be disassembled. Components were spread across multiple workstations, with Jack moving between them with surprising speed and confidence. Most shocking to the Confederation engineers was how Jack kept physically striking certain parts with a tool he called a hammer. What are you doing? Glocksmar had nearly shrieked the first time. Percussive maintenance. Jack had replied calmly, giving a delicate crystal array another solid whack. Sometimes things just need a good knock to realign. Surprisingly, the crystal array had immediately stabilized its energy output. Now, 2 hours into the repair process, Jack was preparing for the most critical and dangerous part of his plan, the spacewalk to repair the external component of the regulator. All right, folks. It's showtime, Jack announced, zipping up his peculiar spacesuit. Unlike the rigid, heavily armored EVA suits the Confederation used, Jack's suit appeared to be some kind of flexible fabric that molded to his body. It looked more like athletic wear than something designed to keep someone alive in the vacuum of space. Are you certain that will protect you? Captain Trelveek asked, eyeing the suit dubiously. Microfiber weave with carbon nanotube reinforcement, Jack explained, tapping the material. Flexible but stronger than steel. Plus it's got a self-sealing feature if it gets punctured. He pulled the helmet over his head, a surprisingly simple clear dome that locked onto the neck ring with a click. Earth's gravity is a bear, so we design our suits light. Can't be lugging around 500 pounds of equipment. Jack checked the seal on his suit one last time, then grabbed a small pack containing his repair tools, including the infamous duct tape, several sealed packets of chewing gum, and various other implements that the aliens couldn't identify. All right, let's do this. Vex, you're on comms, right? The young Eltharian nodded, clutching a communication device nervously. Great. If I start screaming in terror, you'll know something's gone wrong, Jack said cheerfully, then stepped into the airlock. The alien crew watched through a viewport as Jack was ejected into open space. Instead of the careful, methodical movements typical of Confederation spacewalkers, Jack used small thruster bursts to essentially fling himself toward the external housing of the quantum flux regulator. He moves like a Glocksmar struggled to find the right comparison. Like someone who isn't afraid of dying, Zendri finished grimly. Outside, Jack reached the damaged external component and immediately got to work. Through the viewport, the aliens could see him removing panels that were clearly marked "Do Not Remove in Space" in Standard Galactic Common. What's he doing now? Dr. Lumi asked, his skin shifting to a worried lavender as Jack pulled something from one of his suit pockets. He appears to be chewing something, Vex reported, watching through magnified visuals. Indeed, Jack had opened his helmet visor in the vacuum of space, just long enough to pop something in his mouth. After chewing vigorously for a moment, he removed the substance and began applying it to a critical junction in the regulator. He's using the chewing gum, Glocksmar whispered, horrified and fascinated simultaneously, in direct contact with a quantum particle stream. Next came the duct tape, wrapping around connections and components in silver strips that gleamed in the light of the nearby star. Jack worked with the confidence and speed of someone who had done similar repairs countless times before. This defies all known engineering principles, Glocksmar muttered. And yet, look, Captain Trelvik pointed to the status displays, where the critical warnings were beginning to subside. The containment field is stabilizing. In space, Jack had moved to the final phase of his repair. He pulled out a small device that emitted a bright blue light, running it along the seams of his makeshift repairs. "What's that?" Vex asked over the comm. "UV curing light," Jack's voice crackled back. "Hardens the epoxy and creates a bond with the gum compound. Should hold until you reach a proper repair facility." The aliens watched as Jack finished his work, gave the repaired component a final, affectionate pat, a bizarre human gesture that made no technical sense, and then propelled himself back toward the airlock. Once back inside and through decontamination, Jack removed his helmet with a satisfied expression. And that, ladies, gents, and non-binary friends, is how we fix things Earth-style. The status indicators throughout the ship had changed from angry red to cautious yellow, and Cora's voice came over the speakers, the quantum flux regulator operating at 67% efficiency. Containment field stabilized. Immediate crisis averted. There was a moment of stunned silence before the alien crew erupted in cheers, their various physiologies expressing relief in wildly different ways. Glocksmar's scales turning bright blue, Dr. Lumi glowing like a small sun, Vex spinning in excited circles, and even Zendri allowing a small smile to cross his feline features. Captain Trelvik approached Jack, antennae curved in what humans might recognize as humility. "Mr. Reynolds, it seems we owe you our lives." Jack waved a hand dismissively. "Just doing my job, Captain. Though I wouldn't mind a drink if you've got something that won't dissolve my insides." The ship's lounge had been quickly repurposed for an impromptu celebration. The crisis averted, the crew of the Celestial Harmony had time to process what they had just witnessed: a human engineer fixing their most advanced technology with what amounted to primitive adhesives and chewed plant resin. Jack sat at the center of a group of fascinated aliens, sipping a drink that the ship's synthesizer had produced according to human biochemical parameters. It was an alarming shade of blue and smelled faintly of petroleum, but Jack drank it without complaint. "I still don't understand," Glocksmar said, his scales now a curious shade of teal. "By all known scientific principles, your repairs should not have worked. The quantum flux regulator requires precisely calibrated materials to contain the particle stream." Jack leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously under his Deathworld-adapted muscle mass. "That's where you're thinking about it wrong. You're so focused on theoretical perfection that you miss practical solutions." "Could you elaborate?" Dr. Lumi asked, his bioluminescence pulsing with scientific curiosity. Jack set down his drink. "Look, the quantum stream doesn't need perfect containment, it just needs enough containment to prevent catastrophic failure. The tape and gum create a flexible boundary that actually adapts to the quantum fluctuations instead of trying to rigidly control them." Captain Trelvik's antennae twitched with interest. "That contradicts our understanding of quantum mechanics." "Not really," Jack shrugged. "It's just applying the principles differently. On Earth, we learned early that perfect solutions rarely exist in the wild. You have to adapt, improvise." "Because of your Deathworld origins?" X asked eagerly. The young Eltharian had been taking notes throughout Jack's explanation. "Exactly." Jack nodded, warming to his subject. "Earth throws everything at us: hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, predators, extreme temperatures, high gravity, variable atmospheric pressure. We evolved not to avoid problems, but to solve them on the fly." Zendri, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward. "But surely your advanced technology came later," Jack interrupted. "Way later. For most of our history, we were just clever apes trying not to get eaten. We developed tool use not because we were the strongest, we weren't, but because we needed every advantage we could get. When a predator is chasing you, you don't have time to develop the perfect weapon. You grab a stick." The aliens exchanged glances, a new understanding dawning. "So your approach to engineering," Glocksmar began, "is fundamentally different," Jack finished. You folks developed in more stable environments. Your technology evolved through careful iteration, controlled experiments, perfect conditions. Humans? We just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Sometimes literally. He held up the roll of duct tape with a grin. Dr. Lumi's glow had intensified with excitement. This explains so much about human technological development. Your species makes intuitive leaps that seem random to us because you're not constrained by theoretical frameworks. We call it thinking outside the box, Jack said. Though in this case it was more like thinking outside the quantum flux regulator maintenance manual. This elicited a round of alien laughter, translated through their universal communicators. But isn't it dangerous? Vex asked. Working without proper protocols? Jack's expression grew more serious. Sometimes. We've had our share of disasters. But that's another thing about evolving on a death world. We understand that failure is always an option. We plan for it. We build redundancies. And when those fail, we grab the duct tape. Captain Trelvik stood, drawing everyone's attention. Mr. Reynolds, I believe we have much to learn from humans. Your methods may seem unorthodox to us, but they are undeniably effective. And entertaining to watch, added Vex, earning a disapproving glance from Glocksmar. Jack raised his alarming blue drink in a toast, to cross-species cooperation. Your brains are duct tape. As the aliens raised their various drinking vessels in response, a new alarm suddenly blared through the ship. Warning Cora announced with her typical serenity. Gravitational anomaly detected ahead. Impact imminent. Just when they thought the crisis was over, the celestial harmony shuddered violently as it encountered an unexpected spatial distortion. Status report. Captain Trelvik demanded as the bridge crew scrambled back to their stations. We've hit some kind of gravimetric shear, Navigator Pym rippled, their gelatinous form fluctuating with stress. It's like nothing in our charts. The view screen showed a swirling distortion in space ahead of them, not quite a black hole, but something similar and equally dangerous. The quantum flux regulator is holding, Glocksmar reported with surprise, but the gravitational stress is affecting our propulsion system. We're being pulled in. Jack, who had followed the crew to the bridge, studied the phenomenon with interest rather than fear. Looks like a Type 3 space-time fold. We get these near Jupiter sometimes. Every alien head turned to stare at him. You've encountered these before? Dr. Lumi asked, his glow pulsing with rapid flickers of astonishment. Sure. They're tricky but navigable. Jack stepped closer to the view screen. The trick is to ride the edge of the gravity well, using it to slingshot around rather than fighting against it. Captain Trelvik hesitated only briefly. Mr. Reynolds, would you care to offer tactical advice? Jack grinned that unnervingly wide human grin. Thought you'd never ask. He moved to the navigation console beside Pym. May I? May I? The Quivarian navigator shifted to a curious shade of purple but moved aside. Jack studied the controls for a moment, then looked up. Your systems are designed to avoid gravitational disturbances entirely, right? Of course, Zendri replied. Standard Confederation protocol is to maintain maximum safe distance from any spatial anomaly. Yeah, that won't work here, Jack said. We need to get closer. Closer? Multiple alien voices exclaimed in unison. Trust me, Jack said, fingers already dancing over the controls. Pym, I need you to recalibrate the sensors to detect gravitational eddies, not just the main distortion. Surprisingly, the navigator complied without question, their surface rippling with determination. Glocksmar, Jack continued, that repair we did on the quantum flux regulator? We need to reverse the polarity of the particle stream. The Peluvian engineer's scales shifted to a skeptical orange. That's not possible without rebuilding the entire assembly. Yeah, I know, Jack interrupted. But we don't need to rebuild it. Remember that weird coupling I made with the chewing gum? It's reversible. By design. Comprehension dawned on Glocksmar's face. You planned for this? Not this specifically, Jack admitted. But on Earth we have a saying, hope for the best, plan for the worst. Now go reverse that polarity. As Glocksmar hurried off, Jack turned to the captain. We're going to need all power to the forward shields. I mean all power. Captain Trelvik didn't hesitate this time. Zendri, redirect all non-essential power to forward shields. The ship groaned as Jack guided it closer to the space-time distortion. What exactly are we doing? Dr. Loomy asked, clinging to a console as the ship shuddered. We're going to surf the gravity wave, Jack explained, his focus never leaving the navigation controls. These distortions aren't uniform, they have patterns, ripples. If we ride them just right, the distortion itself will fling us clear. The bridge crew watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as Jack deliberately steered the celestial harmony toward what appeared to be certain destruction. Engineering reports ready. Glocksmar's voice came over the comm. Reverse polarity, now, Jack commanded. The ship lurched violently, and for a moment, every system on the bridge went dark. When emergency power restored basic functions, the view screen showed them tumbling away from the distortion at tremendous speed. Stabilizers. Captain Trelvik ordered, and gradually the wild spinning slowed until they were again flying smoothly through normal space. Navigator Pym shifted to a bright yellow color of astonishment. We're clear, and we've traveled nearly 60 light years in the correct direction. A stunned silence fell over the bridge, broken only when Vex began to applaud an earthly gesture he had apparently learned from human cultural databases. Mr. Reynolds, Captain Trelvik said formally, antennae curved in respect, it seems we are once again in your debt. Jack leaned back from the navigation console, stretching his arms above his head. Just applied a little Deathworld thinking to the problem. Indeed, the captain agreed. And I believe we have much to learn from such thinking. In the days that followed as they continued their journey to the nearest Confederation outpost, something remarkable happened aboard the Celestial Harmony. The alien crew began adopting some of Jack's methods cautiously at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. Glocksmar was spotted using a modification of Jack's percussive maintenance technique on a malfunctioning food synthesizer. Dr. Loomy incorporated what he called human intuitive problem-solving into his scientific protocols. Even the straight-laced Zendri was seen carrying a roll of duct tape on his utility belt. When they finally reached the outpost, Jack prepared to return to his own ship, but not before Captain Trelvik made a formal announcement to the entire crew. Today we add a new procedure to the Celestial Harmony's official protocols, the captain declared. The Reynolds method applied improvisation in emergency situations. Jack couldn't help but laugh. You're formalizing chaos? That's the most non-human thing I've ever heard. Perhaps Trelvik acknowledged with a gesture of their antennae that translated as amusement. But we recognize the value in your approach. The Confederation has already requested a full report on your repair techniques. Great, Jack said, hoisting his duffel bag. Just tell them the first rule of the Reynolds method: always bring duct tape. 6 months later, Jack Reynolds was surprised to receive a communication from Confederation headquarters. It seemed that word of his unorthodox repair methods had spread far beyond the Celestial Harmony. The quantum flux regulator repair, now officially termed the Reynolds emergency stabilization technique, had been successfully implemented on 17 other vessels in crisis situations. Moreover, the Confederation Academy of Engineering had created a new course, Adaptive Problem Solving, Lessons from Deathworld Species. The lead instructor? A certain Peluvian engineer with emerald scales and a newfound appreciation for chewing gum. As for Jack, he declined the offered professorship at the academy. He preferred to remain where he belonged in the depths of space, with his toolkit at the ready, waiting for the next impossible problem to solve. Because that's what humans do best.